Okay, there we go. Yeah, as just said, my name is Willow. I use she, her pronouns, and yeah, zines are a really fun way to engage research and in a really accessible and practical way, especially with people who aren't in your field. So that's why this is titled To Spark Conversation and Curiosity, because I think zines are a really great way to do that. So yeah, what is a zine? I was wondering if anyone has engaged with zines before, or if anyone had any comments or about how they've engaged with zines, whether that's making them or just reading them or not at all.
A friend of mine made one at the start of the pandemic, just like featuring some art and some photography. And so that kind of got me interested in the idea.
Cool.
Yeah, and looking at the chat, it seems like a lot of people have never even heard of them before now. So this is super exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so zines are basically a tiny magazine. So that's how it's like a shortened magazine. And they range from the ones we're going to go over today have they use one sheet of paper and have 6 panels in the cover and back cover. But now people make zines that are all the way up to like 20 pages, but they're basically hand bound little pamphlets. And they kind of have like this very DIY sort of aesthetic to them. But yeah. Oop. And so I want to talk about using zines as a tool, because I think that they are really amazing to kind of meet at this space intersecting theory and practice. And zines have been used by marginalized communities for a really long time because they're super accessible and relatively inexpensive. So they're able to spread ideas in a really fun and artistic way that is not expensive at all. And so they really do embody taking these ideas and theory and art, and a lot of zines talk about like feminism and anti-racism and environmental theory and queer theory, and put them into these really accessible, tied with a bow, sort of really small pamphlet resources. So in these zines, so they're easy to print for others. They can be distributed really easily. And they're really cool because now a lot of times people put them online and you can print them anywhere, and they're able to have like a physical copy of whatever you made. So I think that's another really cool part of them. And so making a zine, this is why I love making zines. They are a really great form of creative expression, whether that's visually and writing. You're allowed to, there's really no limitation to what you can do in a zine. And I really like it because it challenges you, especially in the academic sphere, where like we are challenged to know a lot about our very niche interests and niche fields. It kind of challenges to create educational material, at least for us, that is short and leads to curiosity. So it kind of makes you think about what's most important for me to share. Why do I share it this way? How can I engage someone who's not necessarily in my field? So I love the way that it has you think about it because it's such a small format. And like I mentioned too, they're super portable and really accessible. I've taken them to conferences with me or stuck them up near my posters. People can take them. So that's a really nice way to use them. And then, like I said before, they're relatively inexpensive to print and distribute, which is always a plus when you're like wanting to hand out material to people. And I also love them because they're really great for collaboration. I've done quite a few collaborations with zines. So they're a really fun, easy way that you can collaborate with people too. And so going over materials, you really don't need much, but you can use as much as you could possibly want to. Basic materials are like paper, scissors, and a printer, really, especially if you're downloading a zine that someone else already made. But when you're making them yourself, a lot of people use collage or so magazines and old newspapers, whatever you would want to, paper material that you would want to include, pencils, pens. It's really limitless as far as what you would want to include in a zine. So, but basic materials are like paper and scissors and printer, or like a copier is pretty great too. And then a lot of people use digital tools now, but it's not required at all. So a basic template for the zine that we're going to be talking about today, which is using one piece of paper, as I mentioned, this is like the basic template. So on the bottom right-hand corner, you have your back and front cover, and then the pages kind of move to the top right-hand corner, then to the left top-hand corner, and then down to the bottom left-hand corner. And I'll kind of show, there's a really cool visual of how you fold it up in the next slide. So I'll show you that. And then we'll go through how you actually put information into each of these panels as well. So this is a little diagram on the 1 page, 8 mini pages zine. And if this diagram does not make sense to you at all, there are some really great YouTube videos too that really do show very easily how you fold it up. But you basically take your one piece of paper and you would fold it as you would make those 8 little panels. And then in the middle, I don't know if, can you all see my mouse? Okay,
Yeah.
Great. And so then in this middle panel, it shows that you cut down the center pretty much. So you have this hole in the center of all your panels and you smush it together and then fold it. So it comes together really quickly and it's not super time consuming to make a bunch of them too, which is really nice. But yeah, if this does not make sense to you, which I know sometimes visuals like this and diagrams like this do not make sense, there are some really great YouTube videos. You can just look up like how to bind a zine and it will pop right up. I also have a Google folder that has all these resources and this slideshow I can share with you, Jess, afterwards.
Something.
Yeah. And then, so now kind of getting into, you're actually sitting down and you're going to make your zine. Deciding on a topic is always like a challenging part for me because there's so many things I think would be great to engage in a zine. But I feel like the first step for me that I think about is a topic that can be engaged with really easily and very quickly, because you don't have a lot of pages to be able to explain a lot of things or give a lot of background information. You want to kind of get straight to the point that you're trying to make. So you want something that's engaging and then that someone can go and explore later. And so it kind of sparks the curiosity that you're trying to give to someone. And another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people do zine like series. So if you have something that's a broader topic that you're wanting to cover, you can break it up into like a 4 or 5 or 10 part series that you want to cover. So you can kind of cover smaller parts of your topic in individual zines. But yeah, so thinking about something that can be engaged with really easily and that you can, that will go and inspire someone to explore it further. So here's a little outline. This is what I would do when I've sat down, I've thought about my topic, and now I'm starting to think about how am I going to put these ideas on paper. So this is I'm going to be teaching a class here I'm in Wisconsin right now in the summer about backyard pollinators that someone might find. So I'm thinking about using a zine as a resource. So I thought I'd use that as the example of what I've outlined so far for myself, just to kind of get an idea of how I would start a zine and a topic. So I start down here in the bottom right hand corner and think about my cover and my title. And so that's just thinking about what do you want your title to be. And I usually put visuals, like kind of start writing down what I want it to look like. You can also put reference images too. And then on the back cover, I usually include a QR code about that can have your citations and your resources, or if there's anything else you want to add or people to know. I usually have the QR code go to a Google Doc. So you can make like a public Google Doc, and anything that you weren't able to include, you can put on that Google Doc, which is a really great resource, I feel like, because you don't have to, anything you had to cut, you can put it somewhere and people can still reach it, which is really great. And then I move up to the top panel here, which has page 1 and page 2. And so I want to think about, for this, I thought 2 great questions in the beginning would be like, what is pollination and what is a pollinator? So that's pretty easy. And then I made a note up here at the top that I want to make page 1 and page 2 coherent. So that's a really great thing about a zine too, is you can make these 2 pages like have the same background image. And I'll show some examples of that too. So I want to make sure that I'm showing that there's a connection between pollination and the pollinator. And then page 3 and 4 over here, I want to showcase some pollinators that you might see. So just like the visuals, maybe just like some very basic anatomical bees, butterflies, beetles, wasps, those kind of things. Maybe like 2 or 3 words that are like key identifying characteristics of those things. So having these 2 panels be very visual heavy, very few words. And then finally leave off with some sort of message of how people can continue to engage with the material or how they can move forward. So on page 5 down here and page 6, maybe something about key info about observing and identifying native pollinators. Maybe it's leading them to some resources, some identification guides, those kind of things. And then finally ending with how could someone support native pollinators in their backyard? So that's kind of like how I start thinking about things and mapping them out. And I really like using the template to start mapping it out so I can start visualizing in my head what I want. And then you can kind of start seeing how you're going to bring the reader through what you're trying to communicate with them. So after I've done the outline, for me, this is what works. And I'm not saying this is going to work for everyone, but for me, I go right into the writing process of what is going to be the information that I'm writing and bringing into the zine, because for me, I like having the writing done first so I can put it in there and then make the art go around it. So I never have to move my art or change my art, because that's really important to me. But yeah, as far as the writing goes, these texts they're not supposed to be academic. So they can be very casual. They can be poetry, lists, stories, statements, personal opinions, really anything you want to have in there is really encouraged. And then I think my only advice, I guess, is just being succinct and providing only necessary information, but balancing that with super fun and engaging information. So you have to choose what's just a random fun fact that's going to get someone interested, but then also what's necessary information that someone needs to continue moving forward. And then another thing too is using different fonts and styles like bold, italics, underline text to emphasize what are key pieces of information that you want your reader to get from. So if I was doing the pollination, for example, maybe in the first slide, when I'm talking about what is pollination, I would bold or underline coevolution or something like that. Something that someone will know, oh, I should go look this up if I don't know what it is. So I'm kind of telling my audience without having to explain what coevolution is, because that's a lot of words. You should go and look this up and you should go engage more with these ideas. So that's the part about writing. Writing is really fun, and there's some really cool zines that have really awesome poetry about insects or about the natural world woven in with a lot of really cool theory and ecological theory stuff too. So I would say don't shy away from anything creative writing wise, because they do go hand in hand. So yeah. And then arts and visuals. I'm going to show the full zine when I get to the examples, but this is the zine that a pal and I made. Kevin Flores and I collaborated on this one. And so they did the arts and visual stuff, and then I did the writing. And so this is kind of showing, I think this was right after I sent them the title and the citation. So we chose to do, and I'll show this in more detail, but a photograph from the back, and then some drawn in visuals of insects and plants and other organisms that would belong in that environment. And yeah, so that was with the arts and visuals, I mean, you can't do any wrong. It's just however you want to express yourself. A lot of people do collages. A lot of people do little doodles. Some people don't put any visuals in their zines. It's just words. So you really can't do any wrong. I think the only thing I would encourage people to think about is that you want to make something that's somewhat black and white printer accessible. So for us, we have a version that's black and white color accessible where we took out the back images and it's just the drawings instead. That's just something to think about. But yeah, really any way you want to engage visuals, I think is great. Composition, that's one thing that I've thought a lot about when making zines, is keeping in mind the balance between text and visuals, because it's so small that you don't want to have so many texts and all the pages be filled with text. So I usually try to designate a certain panel that I know will be primarily visual. So from the beginning, I know that I have less writing in those two panels, because I tend to write a lot more than can fit in the zines and have to trim a lot down. So I found for myself, if I distinguish that these two panels are going to be primarily images, that helps me think about the composition balance and the engagement balance. Yeah, so I think now we're going to jump into the examples. Yeah, so this is, and I'll kind of walk you all through what we did and how we talked about it too. But this is the zine in the layout that I mentioned before, like the template. So when you cut it out, so this is on one piece of paper. But yeah, so this is the cover and back cover. And so we decided to have a pretty straightforward title. We wanted people to know that this was a tool for conversation. It wasn't really meant to be a primary source, something that's referenced. It's supposed to be a tool to have people start talking about these sort of things. And then on the back, we have our citations and acknowledgements in our QR code. So QR codes are super helpful for zines. I highly recommend them. And you can just, there's a bunch of generators online. You can just look up QR code generator and attach a Google Doc to that and add any extra information that you would want to. And then we also wrote kind of what I was saying earlier, this sort of disclaimer about the zine, about how it is a primary source and how we wanted it to inspire readers and push readers to kind of have action go along with land acknowledgements. That's kind of what that is about. So again, it's like choosing what you want, even though it's a big block of text. It was super important for us to include that because it was pretty core to what we were trying to communicate with our zine. So again, I know I just said like a bunch of things that you should and shouldn't do, but really at the end of the day, it's whatever you think works for your zine and what you're trying to communicate. Yeah, and then we dive right into it right away, as you have to do with zines because they're so small. So we covered what is a land acknowledgement and why is it important. So those are the two things that we thought were super important to get people engaged right away, right from the beginning. Here's what it is, here's why it is important, just saying it. And then we also, there's some other things we did with the background. So each of the images that we have are from different times of the year and from different places across what is now the United States. So there's other things we wove into, and we have like little land acknowledgements on the bottom of what lands they're on. So different things like that that we also incorporated that are small details, but definitely important visually of what we're trying to communicate with our zine as well. And then Kevin and I are both entomologists. We both have entomology backgrounds. We wanted this to be geared towards all ecologists or people who do place-based research. So we incorporated a lot of other organisms and did that very intentionally because we both had the, we were drawn to only include insects and a lot of plants, but we tried to include some salamanders and beavers and that kind of stuff too. But yeah, I don't know here, we could wait here if anyone wants to read it really quickly. Yeah, so this page was a really was very kind of challenging to write because we had to cut a lot and try to really figure out what was really important. I think originally I had a lot more text that had to be cut, but yeah, I think that is part of the fun challenge about a zine, is really figuring out what your core information is and what you're trying to communicate. And who your audience is too, because we knew our audience was going to be people who are in ecology. So I think that's another thing to think about, is who your audience is going to be. And then going into more of that audience element, we then geared it towards ecologists after that. So then this is kind of about specifically talking about place-based research and why it's this practice should be pushed more for in place-based research. Yeah, I'm not sure if we could also read this one too if you want to do that. And then also the use of the bolded word too in this one.
Sorry, is there any way you could read it out loud? I'm on a tiny screen.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Definitely. So it says, why is it important for ecologists? And we said, while land acknowledgements are important across all disciplines, ecologists are in a somewhat unique situation that should arguably pull us to make land acknowledgements a standard practice. Place-based research. Most of us find great joy in being able to spend days out in the field with our study organisms and systems. We smile as we share breathtaking photos of mountain ranges, tall grass prairies, and desert landscapes. While conducting research that requires days spent out in the field collecting data, it seems intuitive that the history of these lands would be learned and understood, especially as the data collected will then be written about, presented, published, and will ultimately benefit the researcher. Unfortunately, this is not often the case. Many do not know whose traditional homelands they are on or understand that their ability to conduct place-based research is completely dependent on the dispossession of Indigenous peoples. Because of this position, sorry, I gotta move the little bar. Because of this position, it is crucial that ecologists begin to include land acknowledgements as standard practice. We have a responsibility to know why we are able to study the landscapes and ecosystems we do. And so like I was mentioning too, these are two really heavy, like this panel and the previous panel are two very text heavy panels. So for the next one, we knew we did not want to have another really text heavy panel. So we did this sort of bullet point do's and don'ts, kind of more action items after we presented this information, kind of more engaging, pushing people to think about it outside of just the zine and maybe reflect more. Yeah, I can read these too. So for our do's, and then for this one too, as you can see, we also use the bolding very clearly to kind of show this is the main point of each of these points. So we have do's and don'ts. Self-reflect, understand and take time to reflect on your own intentions, reflect on how you have benefited from settler colonialism, the removal of Native peoples, and how this influences the research you are able to do. Then next we have take the time to fully understand the history, understand that treaties, policies, and histories of the land you are on, and Native peoples who have called those places home since time began. Learn from Native peoples, read and gather your information from Indigenous historians and sources. Tell the history, do not adjust the history to make it more palatable or comfortable. Make it clear that Native peoples exist in the present. Write your own land acknowledgements, do not copy or paste information or sections from other land acknowledgements. Start somewhere, be honest, open, and transparent about where you are in your learning and understanding. Be aware that there are complex histories that are not openly shared on the internet, in books, or even in non-Native spaces. Native peoples know their histories, be humble and honest, and know you are learning and not an expert. So that was kind of our main do's and don'ts. And then, oops, this is my other one. Oops, sorry, cat just knocked over a lot of things too. Hold on. Let me go back to this one or to this first page. So then you would flip to the citations and acknowledgements again. And so then our QR code has everyone who was involved in the zine. So Kevin Flores and I were we did the writing and the art, but we also had a lot of other people who helped with the concepts. And when we were kind of outlining each of those panels, like I showed before, we had a lot of other people who helped us with main ideas. So everyone's pictures and bios are in that QR code. And then we have a bunch of resources on there too for how to support Native communities and kind of some action items for people to do. So yeah, that's that zine. And then I wanted to show one other one before we can have more of a discussion and maybe some questions and answers too. And so this one was a personal zine that I did. And as you can see, it's got a lot more text than the other one, because this was more of a just free writing that I did, and then I wanted to represent it in a zine. So this zine is about a reflection that I had on Leopoldian land ethics. So I did my undergrad at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Leopoldian land ethics is very intertwined into the school that's there. So I just wrote about how I engage with Leopoldian land ethics. But yeah, so a lot of writing, and then I did digital collage for this one. So I kind of had a bunch of different pictures, and I cut out the butterflies and flowers and insects and put some dots around them. And yeah, I thought that I'd show just a different one compared to the first one I showed you that was more research and more theory based, and more with a targeted audience of who we were trying to communicate the information to. And then also how zines can be used as like a personal practice as well. And like you can have fun with them. You can write your own ideas. And I think it's a great way to engage with zines at first, is kind of, you can play with them and represent anything you want to. But yeah, so these are kind of more of the up close. And I have this in the Google Drive I mentioned, I have it in there. So if anyone wants to look at it and read through it, you are more than welcome to. But I just wanted to flip through really quick so you can kind of see. I just cut out some bugs and put some dots around them and put them on a landscape image that I had. And yeah, so does anyone have any questions about zines and about making zines or all the information that is presented? I know it was a lot of talking, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Willow.
Yeah,
That
of
was
course.
awesome. I am definitely going to be making zines now for like every publication at least, or every chapter of my dissertation.
Right.
James, like he has a question. Do you want to go ahead, James?
Yeah, so for this project, I do intend to make a zine, but it's going to be like poetry focused, so it's going to be very much necessarily feature a lot of words. And it's something that I'm sort of collaborating with another person with, and I anticipate we'll put anywhere from like, I guess my question is, do you have resources for potentially like zines that are maybe slightly longer than simply like a single page? Because I think what I'm going to make is probably going to be a bit longer form.
Yeah, I know there are definitely, I can add them to the folder because I think I have a different folder that has them on there, but there are definitely some more long form zines. I think just the binding is a little bit more challenging because I think the 8-page just makes it easier because you can print it and anyone can bind them. But I think that there are definitely people have come up with all other kinds of ways to bind longer zines. So I don't think you should let that be the limiting factor if you want to make a longer one. I think that it's definitely doable. And I can put those resources on the Google Drive.
That'd be great. Thank you. I'm wondering too, like, have you seen like, is it possible to even just put like 2 of the smaller ones together? Like, I mean, I'm thinking maybe that might suffice for me.
Yeah, probably. I bet there's a way that you could, if you had instructions that came with yours, if you wanted it to be distributed, you probably could glue 2 of like one of the back covers and one of the front covers together or something like that. Yeah, I bet you could.
Yeah, and James, I envision like you could also, I know your project a little bit better. So like I envision like that you could even have a series, kind of like Willow mentioned, like where each zine is a person you interviewed, and it can be like, like and then they can have like their bio and about them, and then the poem and stuff like that. So cool, yeah. I'm glad that's helpful. Any other questions?
When you're doing the like digital collages, are you doing that in like Photoshop or is that like PowerPoint?
You can, I've done it in both. Well, actually, I haven't done it in Photoshop. There's a app called Procreate that's on an iPad. It's a free app. It's kind of like Photoshop, but a little bit, I find it's more accessible and also kind of more intuitive than Photoshop is. But you can also use PowerPoint.
Hey, I came in a little late, so sorry if you missed this. This is very cool, by the way. But like, how do you distribute these, especially for like the general audience ones? I know you mentioned conferences, but like I've been to Zine Fest and that sort of thing. But like, is there interest in like science related zines? These things like, well, how do you get these out there, and who is reading them?
Yeah, I think I haven't done a ton of distributing. All of my distribution has been, I've gone on like Twitter and announced that I've had a zine or something like that. That was kind of my main way, and then just through my university I started giving them out and talking to people about it, and then that kind of spread, at least at UW where I was. And then we also had a thing, I think it was through our Google Doc, where we tracked how many times it was open, and it seemed to be opened a lot. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I've never gone to a zine fest before. I know that there are a lot of them, but I also looked at some zine collections, and it seemed like there were quite a few science more geared ones. So I don't think people would be opposed to them at a zine fest or something like that. But I found just like Twitter and social media and just at my university, those have been the ways that I have worked on distributing them.
I like the idea of visiting them in weird places. It probably depends like what your purpose is, but I imagine people just leave them in the bathroom or like weird places. They want.
Definitely. Definitely. I did that with, there was one that I printed out that I didn't make myself, but it was one on information about Line 3, and I was putting that one all over the place in random places like that in the bathroom. That was like the best place. It was when I was at a field station out in Colorado, and they had little outhouses that were there, and I would leave like 4 in the outhouse and they disappeared, so someone took them.
I love it. Does anyone else have any questions?
If not, I have like a couple discussion questions just to get people starting to think about how they can incorporate their research into a zine. So yeah, does anyone have any ideas of parts of their research they would want to put into a zine, or specific topics that intersect with their research that they feel like would work with a zine and want to share that?
I've had an idea for a zine for a long time, which I'm not doing for this class, but I would like to at some point. The main reason I haven't done it is trying to get is like cooperation from the artist I want to do it with. But I want to make a zine about slime and like where, you know, different forms of slime in nature and it's like, you know, ecological and chemical roles. I have a friend who's really good at drawing slime, and so I want her to do the art for that, but I haven't been able to get her to do it, so that stopped me from making it.
That sounds really cool though. It sounds like it would be a fun, engaging, very engaging zine.
Lots of different organisms that make slime.
Mhm.
Do people ever put like multi-sensory things into zines, like making it sticky like slime, or like you know, like any mixed media things with zines?
I've seen people put like, I've seen some people do insect zines and they have like paper cutouts that kind of like pop out with each of the insects with like wings and stuff that you can move. So people definitely do it. The sky's the limit.
Ah, that's
So,
cool.
yeah, I have a pal who also, they did a zine, which is also in the Google folder I'll share. They did a zine on the bees of Utah, and they had like a seed packet that they put in the back of their zines, which is another kind of cool. It was like a native seed packet.
That's a really good idea. I mean, I guess I can like, yeah, I'm just thinking right now, we have this insect fair every year in Riverside, and this would be great for that. Like we are doing a pollination booth, so having like a zine that we hand out to everybody with like the
Yeah.
seeds on it, that's a really cool idea. Maybe we'll do that.
I guess for my project, my idea is like I want to do like math poetry in a zine or potentially a collection of zines. And so the idea is that it would mainly just contain poetry by math grad students here at UCR, mostly by me. Since there are other math grads here who do write poetry. But I'm just not sure, like I love the imagery in the zines that you've shared with us. But I haven't thought about stuff like that or including other elements. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't mind seeing like more examples of different zines and how people put them together for different purposes.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's so many good like visualizations for math, depending on like what fields you are, but you know, different diagrams and you know, visualization of shapes and stuff. I feel like there's a lot of stuff you could do there, but I don't know. It depends on what the programs are about.
In the Google folder that I'll share too, I keep on mentioning that, but I have a working Google sheet that has a bunch of different zines and the artists on there. But there's one that's coming to mind that it's a insect focused one, but it has poetry in it, and it's about going out on collecting trips, but they have these kind of long poems on one side and then this kind of abstract sort of sketchy drawings that are on the other side. But I'll make sure that it's in there, because I feel like that's what's coming to my mind when you were talking about that, because I feel like the poetry goes really well with sort of like not as, I feel like the ones I showed you definitely are really visually heavy, but I feel like poetry ones go really well with some kind of lighter visuals.
Yeah, and also like, you know, with poetry, like I know some poets like will literally make like, you know, the form of their poem like match the content, right? So it's like if you're talking about like a bug, it's in the shape of a bug, right? The poem itself, like the lines and stuff. So you can also think about like that visual component too, James, I guess, is like like allowing the actual lines to take the shapes you want.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have any ideas about their research or different topics that they would want to do in a zine?
Well, not a research topic, but I know Jess and I were talking about this earlier about making a zine for the entire art show, which is going to be a lot of pages considering how many participants we have. But I think this presentation, Willow, has given hopefully the two of us a lot of ideas on how to make that work.
Cool.
Would you have like a page on about everybody's art, like each person's art piece?
Yeah, probably that. And I'm thinking like, you know how like at art museums and stuff, you have that little plaque, maybe, you know, each participant can write a little paragraph or something about their piece, medium, you know, etc. But we'll have to think on it. But I do, like, I know we're planning to maybe do some nice photography of everyone's pieces. And for people submitting zines, maybe we can add that QR code as well, so we don't have to reprint zines in a zineception. Who knows?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, Catherine. That this is a perfect time to announce that idea and get any suggestions for making that program.
I have to leave in like 3 minutes. So is there any other questions? And I can leave or send, or I don't know if you want to take a screenshot or something, Jess, of the remaining discussion questions if you all want to go through them, or just use them to think about your future zines. But does anyone have any questions before I have to leave?
Oh, sorry about the dog. How do you balance like scientific illustration versus like the sketchy drawings? Like, how do you draw that line, I guess?
I mean, I don't feel like you have to at all. I feel like if that's how you as an artist like to express yourself, I don't think that you should be limited by the zine. You might just be limited by the size a little bit, but I think there's I wish I showed more examples, because I feel like I just kind of showed the two that I have made, that I kind of, they both have very similar styles, but there are quite a few other people who have done very scientific illustration heavy pieces. I feel like they're just they lean more towards a simpler background, so usually just like the scientific illustration on a white background, which I feel like kind of helps draw the attention to the detail that's in there. But I feel like in a zine you shouldn't be stray away from any artistic expression at all, because you can make it work.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. If there's no other questions, then yeah, I mean, we can end early. I'll stick around if people want to ask anything. I know it's the end of the class, so you might have questions. But yeah, we'll let Willow go. Thank you so much.